A girl was tightly restrained on the operating table, surrounded by onlookers casting eerie glances her way. She pleaded desperately for mercy, but the doctor, without hesitation, pressed the button at the back of her neck. In the next moment, her body began to melt, eventually turning into a pool of blood. Subsequently, a horrifying parasite slowly crawled out. This parasite was not of earthly origin. However, once it parasitized a human body, the host would gain extraordinary superpowers. Depending on the host's physiology, the superpowers varied. Yet, being parasitized by this creature came with severe side effects. The parasitized individuals had to constantly take medication to control the parasite within them, or their internal organs would dissolve within 35 hours, leading to death. This particular parasite could only target young human females, and all of these events were orchestrated by a mysterious research institute called Vin Gulf. Miko and Ryota were once close childhood friends. One day, Miko told Ryota that she had seen an alien near the dam. As they set out to see the alien, an accident occurred, leading to both of them falling from a height. Ryota was fortunate to be rescued, but Miko tragically lost her life on the spot. Since then, Ryota has lived in a state of self-blame and guilt. Whenever he thought of Miko, he couldn't help but remember the 3 distinctive black moles under her armpit. 10 years flew by, and now in his second year of high school, Ryota became the sole member of the school's astronomy club. The reason why he did this, he wanted to prove the existence of aliens for the deceased Miko. One day, a transfer student named Koha arrived in class. Ryota was astonished to find that Koha bore an uncanny resemblance to Miko. Excited, he approached Koha, only to find out that she had no recollection of him. In an attempt to prove he wasn't mistaken, Ryota asked Koha to show him her armpit. Instead, Koha responded with a slap. During afternoon swimming class, as the boys were mesmerized by their female classmates in swimsuits, a girl's leg got stuck in the pool's suction outlet. The girl quickly went into a state of oxygen deprivation. While watching the scene, Koha muttered to herself that 2 students would die at school Toda. Just as she finished speaking, the ground near the pool began to collapse due to a mysterious force, freeing the girl. After school, Ryota headed to the planetarium as usual. While pondering the day's events, he was surprised to see Koha following him to the planetarium. Koha informed Ryota that 2 students would die at school today, with the girl rescued from the pool being one of them. The other student destined to die was Ryota himself. Koha instructed Ryota to take the last bus home that night no matter what. If he missed it, he would die. Just then, Koha received a mysterious phone call. The girl on the other end prophesied, "Ryota must die tonight no matter what." Koha immediately asked Ryota to stay at the planetarium tonight. However, Ryota didn't believe her and decided to walk home. Suddenly, a mudslide erupted on the mountainside. In a critical moment, Koha appeared and caught the rolling boulder with her bare hands. She then revealed to Ryota that she was a sorcerer who had escaped from a research institute. Her superpowers were acquired through surgery and medication. She showed Ryota the device on the back of her neck, and it was then that Ryota noticed there were no 3 moles under Koha's armpit. Koha implored Ryota to keep her abilities a secret, as discovery by the research institute would mean certain death. From that day onward, Koha never returned to school. On this day, the teacher entrusted Ryota to deliver the activity manual to Koha. On the way to Koha's house, Ryota passed by several armored vehicles, inside of which were 2 bound girls with supernatural abilities. Ryota paid no attention and continued on to his destination. Arriving there, he found Koha humming a tune. Koha told Ryota that her purpose in coming to school was to save Ryota and the girl. With the mission accomplished, she saw no reason to return to school. Suddenly, a wail could be heard nearby. Ryota wanted to investigate, but Koha used her powers to drive him away. However, halfway there, Ryota remembered he hadn't given the activity manual to Koha, so he turned back. While Koha was out pouring water, Ryota sneaked into the room and found a motionless girl lying on the bed. Koha then informed Ryota that the girl, named Kana, was also a sorcerer. She possessed the powerful ability to foresee the future, but was left as a vegetable, with only her left hand fingers capable of movement. Normally, she used a voice keyboard to communicate her thoughts. This time, Kana foresaw her companion being captured and brutally killed by the research institute. Upon hearing this, Koha was deeply saddened. To protect Ryota from being involved, she drove Ryota away. In truth, both Kana and Koha didn't have much time left. Therefore, Kana urged Koha to return to school. allowing her to experience as much joy as possible in the final days of their lives. On that day, Ryota told Koha that the school would be holding an outdoor activity next weekend. Given that Nico had always wanted to go to the seaside, Ryota hoped to take Koha along to see the ocean as a way of compensating for Nico. At that moment, Kana messaged them, foreseeing a woman near the school dying in a car accident. The two rushed to the scene, desperately trying to save her, and succeeded in rescuing the woman who should have been hit by the car. After school, Ryota bought cake and food to take to Kuroha's shelter. Previously, Kuroha and Kana had been surviving on wild plants and game at home. Having not eaten cake in many years, they were thrilled. Due to Kana's paralysis, Kuroha had to beat the cake and feed it to her. As for the last piece of cake, Ryota had intended to keep it for himself. But Kuroha ended up in tears over a dispute for it. Seeing Kuroha so innocent, Ryota decided to take good care of them. Before parting ways, Kuroha promised to go see the sea with Ryota next week. Meanwhile, the girl who had been captured was forcibly pressed with a button at the back of her neck by the researchers. This was a tool used in the laboratory to execute sorcerers. The next day, Kuroha showed up at school covered in bandages. Ryota asked her the reason, but Kuroha was reluctant to tell him. So, Kuroha decided to check on her at home, only to find her bleeding from 7 orifices, collapsing on the ground. It turned out that as sorcerers, their bodies had undergone modifications. They needed to take a capsule called death suppressant every day to stay alive. Without the medication, their skin would burst open and blood would gush out after 30 hours, leading to their organs dissolving in death after 35 hours. Currently, Kuroha only had 10 pills left, enough for her and Kana to last for 5 days. However, Kuroha, wanting to go to the seaside with Ryota in 8 days, always waited until the last moment to take the medication. But an accident occurred. While boiling water, Kuroha didn't notice the fire, causing a kitchen fire that destroyed the remaining death suppressant. Additionally, Kana had taken her last pill yesterday, meaning she had less than a day to live. Fortunately, Ryota had a photographic memory. He immediately recalled the identification code for death suppressant and found the location of the pharmaceutical factory. Their only option now was to go to the factory and steal the medicine, but that's a huge risk, and they don't know how to get around the security system. Kuroha contacted Kazumi, the sorcerer who escaped from the research institute with him. Kazumi's power is to control the network. For her, bypassing the security system was a piece of cake. However, she demanded half of the medication if they managed to steal it. Just at this moment, Kana once again saw a prophecy. This time she saw Kuroha's body being cut in half. It was the research institute's director, Chisato, who discovered someone had breached their security system. So, he dispatched a powerful sorcerer, Saori, to ambush them. Sorcerers also have their own rankings, ranging from 3A to C. Kana and Kuroha were only C and B level sorcerers, considered defective products about to be executed. On the other hand, double level sorcerers could use 2 abilities. Saori's first ability was to sever anything within a 6-meter radius, and her second ability was time reversal. The only weakness of a sorcerer was a button at the back of their neck. Pressing the left bottom corner would cause the sorcerer to melt and die, while pressing the right bottom corner would disable their abilities for a day. Overusing their powers could also lead to a day of inability. Kuroha didn't know what the final button did, only that it was said to result in something worse than death. Because Kana didn't predict Ryota's death, so Ryota decided to accompany Kuroha to the pharmaceutical factory. Their plan was for Kuroha to enter through the front gate to distract Saori, while Ryota would press the button on Saori's neck from behind. However, Kuroha didn't want Ryota to sacrifice himself with her. In a letter to Ryota, she modified the plan, instructing him to grab the medicine and leave the factory directly, but Ryota's choice was to assist Kuroha even if it meant death. Just as he made this decision, Kana received a new prophecy. Ryota would be killed alongside Kuroha. Kuroha's powers could only destroy objects, not harm people, putting her at a disadvantage in the fight against Saori. At this moment, Ryota, who had quietly approached from behind, unexpectedly discovered 3 moles on Kuroha's chest. It turned out that Kuroha was his childhood friend Nico, but due to changes in her body's growth, the moles had shifted positions. Touched, Ryota vowed to protect Kuroha this time. However, in the next moment, Kuroha was sliced into pieces before him. In anger, Ryota struck through Saori's heart and forced her to use her second ability, time reversal. Saori then cut Ryota in half as well, but she would soon die from a pierced heart. Reluctantly, she used her ability to reverse time, leaving her extremely weakened due to the simultaneous use of 2 powers. She was tied up by Ryota and Kuroha, Due to the time reversal, Ryota forgot about the 3 moles on Konoha's body. Meanwhile, someone remotely pressed the button on the back of Saori's neck, causing her to melt and die in front of Ryota and Konoha. They discovered a hideous parasite inside Saori's body, which Ryota promptly crushed under his foot. Searching the entire factory, they only found 2 boxes of death suppressant, which would only extend their lives by a few days. Based on their calculations, Kana was likely nearing her limit. Frantically, Konoha rushed back to the observatory and found Kana in a critical state. It turned out that Kazumi had split her last capsules in half, barely keeping Kana alive. As per the agreement, Kazumi took a box of death suppressant without question. With the death suppressant now in hand, Ryota and Konoha finally made it to the seaside as they wished. At Ryota's suggestion, Konoha became a member of the astronomical observatory. She and Kana moved in together at the observatory. Out of trust in Ryota, Konoha entrusted him with her long-preserved extraterrestrial fertilized egg and a terminal device, crucial equipment handed to her by a comrade at great risk during their escape. On the other side, Kazumi once again arrived at the observatory. She astonishingly saw through Kana's secret. Although Kana was paralyzed, she could actually move if she wished. Later in the evening, she seduced Ryota and deliberately exposed her body to him, using it as leverage to forcefully move into the observatory. Not only that, she also transferred to Ryota's class by changing schools. However, the calm times did not last long. The director of the research institute, Chisato, in order to retrieve Sorcerer 1107, dispatched the busted girl Takatori as an undercover agent into the observatory. To celebrate the new member's arrival, Ryota decided to hold a stargazing event the following night. However, Kazumi took the opportunity to flirt with Ryota in front of everyone, directly provoking Konoha's strong dissatisfaction. She used her powers to destroy the table. After observing for a long time, Ryota noticed that each time Konoha used her powers, she would lose some memories. Kazumi told Ryota that every sorcerer using their powers comes at a price. Through extensive experimental body modifications, Konoha had lost her childhood memories, even of her parents. The next day, Ryota led everyone to the mountaintop for stargazing. However, during Takatori's stargazing, Ryota noticed a button at the back of Takatori's neck. It was at this moment that Kana once again sensed a new prophecy. She predicted Konoha's death, with Takatori standing beside Konoha's body, smiling. This frightened Ryota, who hurried over to question Takatori. But to their surprise, Takatori's reaction was even more shocked. She claimed that she had just found out as well that Konoha, along with the 3 of them, were all sorcerers. Takatori, like the others, was a B-rank sorcerer. Her ability involved swapping positions with a selected target. This power was incapable of causing harm to others and could only be used once per day. At this moment, Konoha stepped forward, leading everyone to set aside their suspicions of Takatori. After the event ended, Kana secretly told Ryota that her prophecy had changed slightly. Konoha would not die, but the person killed by Takatori would be Ryota. The specific time was the following evening, at a large lake nearby, where Konoha would be tied up. Ryota decided that since the incident was at the lakeside park, he would simply avoid going there. At that moment, a sorcerer named Shino called Kazumi, being chased by double-level sorcerers and located at the nearby lakeside park. Upon hearing this, Konoha immediately wanted to go and rescue Shino. Ryota desperately tried to stop her, but Konoha, who was eager to save her, unleashed her powers and sent him flying. Helpless, Ryota followed suit. At the lakeside, Konoha recognized the pursuer as Sorcerer Kakako, whose ability was to unleash cannon shots from her mouth, capable of easily demolishing a building. Shino, hiding in a house to protect a kitten, ended up getting half of her body blown to pieces in the attempt. Seeing Shino dead in Kakako's immense power, they had no choice but to return to the observatory. Ryota and the girls spent a few happy days together, but their medicine was running out. Without it, their lives would come to an end. In response, Ryota sought out his uncle, Dr. Kaguru, a pharmaceutical researcher. Ryota laid everything bare to him, hoping Kaguru could help them develop a substitute drug. However, Kaguru delivered grim news. Replicating the medicine would take at least a month, possibly as long as half a year. Though not optimistic, this provided a glimmer of hope. Upon returning home, Ryota received the upsetting message from his uncle that due to the complex structure of the death suppressant, it would indeed take at least 6 months to successfully replicate. This discouraging update cast a pall over everyone. Ryota knew their only hope now was to locate the research institute. However, nobody knew its exact location. Therefore, Ryota planned to head to crowded places to activate the crucial terminal device, hoping to uncover the whereabouts of the research institute. Together with Kazumi, Ryota arrived at an attic in a densely populated area. There, Ryota activated the terminal, revealing a somewhat blurry map. This should be the location of the research institute. The remaining death suppressant was only enough to sustain them for 3 weeks, but Kuroha's memory was deteriorating. She even forgot about their recent singing outing. A terrified Ryota then realized that perhaps one day, Kuroha might forget him again. On the other side at the research institute, Director Chisato decided to send out the most powerful S-rank sorcerer, Fujisaki, to capture Ryota and his group. Fujisaki's strength had reached a level capable of destroying the entire world. Consequently, the research institute had no choice but to dispatch 7 A-rank sorcerers to monitor her. As soon as she appeared, she slaughtered all the bystanders who had seen her, and she looks exactly like Kuroha. With Fujisaki back in freedom, she began to revel in the human world alone. Among the 7 sorcerers killed by Fujisaki, there was one named Hatsuna who quietly revived using her own supernatural abilities. Upon her resurrection, she immediately found Kuroha and joined their group. However, this led to an even greater shortage of death suppressant for them. Meanwhile, there was good news from Kagaru's end. After repeated experiments, he was confident in replicating a similar medicine within a month. Unfortunately, their current supply of death suppressant was only enough for 5 people for a week. However, if all the medicine was given to one person, that person would have a chance to survive. Meanwhile, Fujisaki met with Chisato as agreed. Right away, Chisato slapped Fujisaki, but surprisingly, Fujisaki didn't get angry at all, because she was deeply in love with Chisato. One of Fujisaki's abilities was to sense the positions of other sorcerers. Using this power, Chisato easily located Ryota and his group. On the other side, Kazumi suggested drawing straws to decide who would survive. But to her surprise, everyone chose to abstain. Unable to watch her companions perish, Kazumi ultimately decided to face the end alongside them. Thus, the group planned to spend their last week together happily. However, Fujisaki also found their location at that moment. To everyone's shock, Fujisaki turned out to be Kuroha's biological sister. Yet, now she had fallen madly in love with the research institute's director, Chisato, and obeyed his every command. The 1107th sorcerer that Chisato has been searching for is Takatori. Ryota quickly moved forward to divert attention, while Hatsuna tried to press the button at the back of Fujisaki's neck. Unfortunately, Hatsuna discovered that the button on Fujisaki was different from the others. In the next instant, Hatsuna met a tragic end at Fujisaki's hands, and under Chisato's orders, Fujisaki actually intended to kill her own younger sister, Kuroha. In a critical moment, Ryota rushed over to shield Kuroha from the attack. On the brink of death, Ryota had a vision of the deceased sorcerer, Toku. Toku revealed to Ryota that Kuroha possessed a power even greater than Fujisaki's. Due to fear of this power, the Research Institute had sealed it away. To unlock the seal, one needed to press the top button on Kuroha's neck. However, there was a 99% chance of failure. If it fails, Kuroha will melt and die. But in the end, Ryota couldn't bear to do it. At this moment, a group calling themselves Witch Hunter also arrived at the observatory. Upon seeing this, Chisato immediately joined forces with Fujisaki to forcibly seize Takatori. After they left, Ryota's heartbeat also stopped. Hatsuna, who had just revived using her supernatural abilities, decided to use her powers once more to bring Ryota back to life. However, when Ryota was revived, Hatsuna, due to excessive use of her powers, melted and died. The Witch Hunters were originally an organization that hunted down sorcerers. Their motive for killing sorcerers stemmed from a parasitic organism within their bodies called Dorachel. These organisms would consume the bodies of sorcerers and eventually transform into cannibalistic monsters. What was even more terrifying was that the Dorachel inside Takatori's body was an evolved version. If the Dorachel within her successfully hatched, every cell of life on the planet would dissolve. Upon hearing this dreadful news, Ryota immediately suggested cooperation. Kazumi would infiltrate the Research Institute's network system to locate their position, and then the Witch Hunters would guide them to the Institute. Chisato's desire to obtain Takatori primarily stemmed from his sister Rina, who tragically passed away years ago. Chisato preserved Rina's brain and fed it to the Dorachel within Takatori, believing that this would allow Rina's consciousness to replace Takatori's and bring her back to life. Unfortunately, this plan never succeeded. Subsequently, Chisato decided to reimplant the Dorachel from Takatori. But at that moment, the Dorachel unexpectedly began to hatch inside Takatori's body. In a selfless act to protect humanity, Takatori chose to sacrifice herself along with the Dorachel within her. Meanwhile, Ryota and the others were on their way to the rescue. Koha and Kazumi encountered Chisato and Fujisaki, where Chisato once again ordered Fujisaki to kill them. On the other side, as Ryota rushed into the research institute, he found Takatori on the brink of death. At this moment, Takatori had already inherited Rina's consciousness. Rina pleaded with Ryota to convey to Chisato to stop harming others. After speaking, Takatori passed away. Ryota needed to quickly find Koha and Kazumi. In the corridor, he discovered Kazumi's body had been severed in half. Realizing there was no hope for her, Kazumi urged Ryota to find Koha swiftly. Simultaneously, Kana prophesied that everyone would die. She immediately instructed the resurrected Hatsuna to press the top button on her own neck. On the other side, Ryota finally found Koha. He then conveyed Rina's last words to Chisato. But things had escalated to a point of no return. Fujisaki once again took action, intending to take them out. In the nick of time, Kana suddenly appeared and blocked the attack. The button on the back of Kana's neck was actually capable of restoring her mobility, but in doing so, she would lose her powers. If Fujisaki were to attack again at this moment, everyone would perish. In the moment of desperation, Koha pressed the unsealing button, which had only a 1% success rate, yet she miraculously succeeded. This time, not only did she awaken her true power, but she also regained all her memories. Koha's belief in protecting her companions was incredibly strong. Fujisaki's powers now seemed feeble and powerless before her. Just then, the witch hunters arrived. Just as they were about to shoot Fujisaki, Chisato unexpectedly shielded Fujisaki from all the bullets. This demon who casually disregarded human life was now actively protecting Fujisaki. Fujisaki, who had lost her beloved, descended into complete madness. She prepared to gather all her powers and take the whole world down with her. At this moment, as the only one who could stop Fujisaki, Koha made peace with the idea of sacrificing herself. After bidding Ryota a final farewell, she flew directly towards Fujisaki. With all her strength, she created a massive black hole that swallowed Fujisaki and everything around her. When the black hole disappeared, the ground beneath Koha began to collapse, reminiscent of 10 years ago, but this time, Ryota managed to grab Koha in time. Though due to Koha releasing all the energy within her, she had now lost all her memories, completely forgetting Ryota. Yet, this battle secured a brighter future for Ryota and the others. Kaguru also brought good news. The death suppressant had been successfully manufactured. The witch hunters will proceed with their investigation into the organization behind Chisato. Kazumi was also resurrected by Hatsuna's supernatural abilities. In the story's conclusion, Ryota took the girls back to the observatory to gaze at the stars once more. Little did they know that the stars above were gradually awakening Koha's memories.